Hi, Mr. Gabriel.
Hi, Eliza.
The camera is not on. Can you see? Ah, there I am. Hi. So sorry about that. I've been having a little some network issues. Got to get this started, but I have it ready to go. Do you have any questions for me before we let these people in? Do you have your
No,
slides up or anything?
yeah, I'll be set for that.
Okay, so
Got them ready to go.
how it's gonna go? I'll just introduce myself, introduce you, introduce the webinar series, and then I'll let people put questions in the chat, but we'll wait until the end of your presentation to do questions.
Okay, that's fine. If from my perspective, if someone wants to do if someone has any clarification that they need, that's fine too. But
Okay.
I'll leave it up to you.
All right. Well, I mean, I feel good about it. I'm ready to go when if you want me to start letting people in.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining. I'm going to give a few more seconds for people to come into the waiting room and then let people in. It's good to see everybody. I hope we're all having a great day. Give a few more seconds for people to come in real quick. Okay. Well, I see everybody's here. So thank you all for coming and joining. This is the first of a webinar series with NIHB and with the CDC that is partnership. We're going to be talking about basically regional tribal environmental health issues. And our first issue that we're going to be talking about is earthquake safety and earthquake warnings. Earthquakes pose a major threat to tribes across the United States. It can happen in tribal areas as well. But this webinar will explore causes of earthquakes, the effects of earthquakes that happen, the shakes that happen on communities. It also includes the downstream hazards like tsunamis, landslides, um, and how you can prepare for quakes before they happen. Our speaker today is Mr. Gabriel, and he is, I would say, an expert in the field, if I may. He's very charismatic. He's very excited to talk to you guys today, and I'm very excited to have you all joining on the first series. Just some brief information. This session will be recorded. I will be posting the recording on our NHB's website in the coming week or so after the recording is done. And if anybody wants to slide or any other further information, just please put your email address um, in the chat so I can keep note of that. In fact, just put your email in the chat anyway so that I can reach out to you for future information about the rest of the summits and the webinars and other information we'll be having in the environmental health team at NHB. Um, Without further ado, if you don't mind, we'll get started. The floor is yours, Mr. Gabriel.
Thank you, Eliza, and thank you all for having me here today. And I appreciate being able to speak to you all. Before I share my slides, I just want to give a few words of introduction. I'm a seismologist with the University of Washington, specifically at the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, and we are responsible for monitoring all the seismic activity in Washington, Oregon. But I know that I'm speaking to people from all across the country, and in fact, I don't know where all of you are located. I don't know all of you who you all represent, but I would love to maybe hear from where you're coming from in the chat. If you like to introduce yourself, if you want to say, uh, what you work on, give the type of area, your background would be great. Um, that would just help me know who I'm talking to. And um, so given that we have a diverse audience here, I want to give a broad perspective first about earthquakes in the US. And I want to give kind of a little earthquakes 101. And then I'm going to do some earthquake preparedness stuff. I'm going to talk about what you as an individual or an organization can do to get ready for earthquakes and protect yourself during and after. And I'm going to also spend a lot of time talking about earthquake early warning. And that's, for one, that's the main part of my job. I specialize in earthquake early warning. Um, and also it's a big thing. It's a really important step that tribes can take now to protect themselves in various ways. We'll talk about all the details there. One thing is that the earthquake early warning right now is only available in Washington, Oregon, and California. And that may change soon. That might expand to further states, but for now, it's just the mainland west coast of the U.S. And any tribal land within those borders would also be included and also have the benefits of earthquake early warning. And one last note is uh, feel free to interrupt my presentation. We could be informal here, and feel free to leave a note in the chat during the presentation. I won't necessarily be able to see it during the presentation, but maybe Eliza can help and interrupt if there's any clarifications that we need. So now I'm going to share my screen and I'll see you on the other side. So let's get started. So first of all, where are earthquakes an issue in the US? Well, earthquakes can happen anywhere. They can happen at any time. That's true, but they are more likely to happen in some places than others. And this is a map of general earthquake hazard in the US. And hazard just means where serious earthquakes are likely to happen. And you see that a lot of the earthquake hazard is concentrated on the West Coast, in Alaska and Hawaii. It's partly the Mountain West, and then there's this kind of big splotch in the South Midwest from kind of St. Louis area over to South Carolina. And there's another little band up in the Northeast near the Canadian border, near Quebec. All of this is good basic information. Hazard is important. Hazard tells us where nature is giving us earthquakes. Hazard's not the only story. Risk is really what matters to us. And risk in this disaster resilience world combines hazard and vulnerability, where people are vulnerable and where people are exposed to earthquakes. So if an earthquake happens in the middle of nowhere, it doesn't affect anyone, well, it's a high hazard, but a low risk. But if an earthquake, even a small earthquake, happens in a major city and the city, maybe the building stock isn't of high quality, or people aren't ready, people are not expecting an earthquake, well, that might be a lowish hazard, but could be a very high risk. Why, in general, do earthquakes happen? Well, particularly for the West Coast, what I'm showing here is a map of the Pacific Ocean. And what you're seeing, you may have heard of the Pacific Ring of Fire from back in the day. And that's basically a circle of volcanoes and large earthquake activities that take place in this ring around the Pacific Ocean. And that extends all across Alaska and down the West Coast, and of course, internationally as well. And um, this is kind of the source of the biggest earthquakes and volcanic hazards and tsunami hazards and landslide hazards are all along this area, because this is where the plate boundaries occur. So everywhere you see underneath, in some places you could see underneath these earthquakes, and each of these dots represents an earthquake. underneath these, you see this red line, and that basically represents the plate boundaries. Wherever there's a plate boundary, that's where two plates are colliding. It could be one plate diving beneath another, subducting. Could be plates sliding past each other. That's a situation in California, sliding laterally against each other. But either way, this is where the biggest earthquakes happen. You need a big fault to create a big earthquake. Um, and of course, there are earthquakes inland in the US, but those are, in general, kind of downstream consequences of what's happening at the plate boundaries. That's not always the case, but that's mostly the case. Now we'll do a little bit of terminology stuff that will be useful to know and understanding earthquakes. So we'll talk about earthquake magnitude and we'll talk about earthquake intensity. And both of these are scales that are used to measure the size of earthquakes. Magnitude is the one that you hear a lot in the news. Sometimes you hear this on the Richter scale. That's usually a little outdated, but a Richter scale is kind of an old way of expressing magnitude. Sometimes you'll just see a capital M and then a number. That'll be M6, M7. That means magnitude. Magnitude is just a representation of the total energy released by an earthquake, the total size of an earthquake. And the magnitude scale can be a little bit misleading because it's not a linear scale, it's an exponential scale, which means that a magnitude 6 earthquake is not just a little bit bigger than a magnitude 5. It's actually about 32 times stronger than a magnitude 5. And magnitude 7 is 32 times stronger than a magnitude 6. And so that means a magnitude 7 is about 1,000 times strong as a magnitude 5. So a little bump in a magnitude scale from 5 to 5.5 or 5.5 to 6 is not a small difference. It's actually a huge difference. So the numbers can be misleading if you just think about it this way. And so the biggest earthquakes that can happen really in the world are around magnitude 9 or a little bit higher. And that's true for Alaska. Those are possible in Alaska, and those are possible offshore of the Pacific Northwest. Those are big subduction zone earthquakes. Those can be those enormous energy release earthquakes, earthquakes that take several minutes to rupture across the whole fault, that shake the ground for, 5 minutes or more. For those of us who live or have lived in California, which is a place where earthquakes are much more run of the mill than they are in some other places in the country. You might get a lot of magnitude 3s and 4s. Sometimes if there's a magnitude 5, everyone in the area will feel it, but it probably won't do too much damage. When we start getting to magnitude 6, magnitude 7 especially, that's where you start getting a lot of damage for US buildings, given our building codes here. And then as you get even higher than that, these are once in a generation, once in a lifetime kind of events, but there's still things we need to be prepared for. So that's earthquake magnitude. Another important way to measure the size of earthquakes is something with intensity. Now, if you think about earthquake magnitude as, imagine having a light bulb with a certain power. So it's maybe like a 60-watt bulb. Well, the intensity is more like is analogous to the brightness of that light bulb. So if you're right in front of the light bulb, it's going to be pretty powerful. It's going to be pretty intense. If you're further away from the light bulb, it's not going to be as bright. If you're further away from the earthquake isn't going to feel as intense. So magnitude, there's one magnitude number assigned to an earthquake based on the total amount of energy it's released. And then intensity is how people experience it. If you're close to the earthquake, you're going to have higher intensity, no matter how big the earthquake is. And if you're further away, obviously, there will be lower intensity or, no intensity. You won't, obviously, if you're far enough away from an earthquake, you're not going to feel it at all. And so somewhat confusingly, this magnitude is represented as M, and intensity is represented as MMI, which stands for modified Mercalli intensity. They both have M's in it, but like I said, the intensity is something that is basically personalized to a given location. And when we think about earthquake intensities, um, you know, if you feel weak shaking, let's say you're sitting in a car and you feel a little rumble and you think, I don't even know if that was an earthquake. Well, maybe that was something like an intensity 2 or 3 at your location. As you get to these higher intensities, as you get closer to the center of the earthquake, you might experience things falling off shelves, dishes breaking, more serious rattling over here. At the higher intensities, intensity 7 and above, you'll get damage to buildings, brick edifices will start cracking or breaking. Uh, as you get these severe intensities, obviously the damage can be much more strong than that. So those are these two numbers to keep in mind, and both of these matter to how we experience earthquakes. So uh, probably many of you have experienced an earthquake yourselves. Probably many of you have not, or at least not in a while. And if you need a reminder, I'll just play a little video of what it's like to be in an earthquake. And this is from a public school in Alaska from an earthquake in 2018. Don't let yourself be convinced to do something that you know is bad. And then Ian finally just shared with us. Okay, so that was what I would probably call a moderate earthquake. And if we go back to our intensity scale, that was probably somewhere around 5 intensity, or maybe 6. There was some rattling, but nothing really, the desks weren't moving. Nothing actually fell over. The lights flickered on and off. It was probably a very scary experience. Of course, earthquake shaking could be much milder or much stronger than that. So this is kind of a typical experience of an earthquake in a classroom. And the reason I wanted to show this video in particular is because in a classroom, a classroom is one of the locations where people in the United States are most prepared for earthquakes. And from an emergency response perspective, this student and these teachers did exactly what they were supposed to do. They started feeling shaking and they recognized it as an earthquake, and they immediately did what they've drilled every year. Because in Alaska schools, they, in addition to fire drills or any other kind of safety drills, they do earthquake drills. And so they prepare to drop, cover, and hold on during shaking. So they all quickly got under their desks, they covered their head and neck, and they kind of rode out the shaking. This video is also instructive because it kind of gives us a basic qualitative perspective about what it's like to be an earthquake. So, for example, the shaking can last only a few seconds or can last up to several minutes. There's going to be loud noises in an actual earthquake. It could be from either the ground. You might hear a roar coming from the ground. That would be the earthquake itself. Earthquake is very similar to a sound wave, and when it reaches the surface, oftentimes you can hear it as a kind of roaring sound. There's also kind of clattering furniture, things knocking around. Earthquakes can feel different depending on where you are, depending on what wave you're feeling it. Typically, earthquakes start with what's called a P wave, which is a compressional wave or primary wave. And that feels like a pulse if you can feel it at all. It kind of like a shock, just like a punch from the ground. And that's often what often people won't feel those, but sometimes you do feel that P wave. Sometimes you might feel it, but not even know what's happening because it doesn't feel like this kind of rocking, shaking. It's not as noticeable, but you can be sure that your pets are noticing it. You can be sure that a dog is noticing, or a cat, or a horse. And a lot of times when people see videos of animals reacting to earthquakes before people know they're happening, it's because they felt the earthquake. They've just felt this more subtle P wave. And the P wave is followed by an S wave, which stands for secondary wave. You can think of this as a kind of lateral shaking wave. And this is a more rocking, motion or side to side motion. It can express itself in different ways, but that could be more violent. It can last a longer time. And um, one last thing, we'll go into more details here, is that people tend to get injured in earthquakes, um, not when buildings collapse in the U.S. Most earthquakes and most earthquakes in the U.S., really anywhere, are not strong enough to damage or certainly not collapse buildings. Um, and in the US, we have pretty good building codes in areas where earthquakes are expected. And there's some older buildings where this isn't true, but most buildings where people spend most of their time are going to be able to withstand an earthquake. They will stand up to the earthquake. And how people tend to get injured, again, it's not always true, but people tend to get injured when they get knocked to the ground or when objects land on them. And one of the most dangerous places to be is the side of a building, because building edifices, especially those made of brick, are unreinforced. They're really susceptible to shaking, and they could be brittle. And in the last large earthquake in Washington State, for example, was called the Nisqually earthquake. It happened in just about, you know, just around this time of year, early 2001. So that would be about 23 years ago to the day, approximately. The Nisqually earthquake, it did a lot of damage in terms of dollar value. It didn't kill that many people, but those who it did kill were in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were typically at the edge of buildings where an edifice collapsed onto people. So, like those kids were demonstrating, if you do feel an earthquake, if you feel it during this presentation or somewhere else, the best thing to do is drop, cover, hold on, no matter where you are. And of course, that's not true for all people, and not everyone can quickly and easily get to the ground and get to cover based on your own limitations, your ability to move around quickly, or just where you are. So, we would modify this drop, cover, hold on advice depending on your situation, and your situation best. If you are near something that's if you're near like a large window pane, for example, in a hotel lobby, let's say, then you probably want to get away from that glass. If you're underneath a large projector in an auditorium space, well, who knows? It's probably not the best place to be. So you might move to somewhere slightly safer in a couple seconds and then get low to the ground. Again, the idea is to not get knocked over, to not have things fall on you. So do what you can. And plenty of other situations that people are typically in. You spend probably a third of your life in a bed. If you're in a bed, well, that's actually a pretty safe place to be. You can stay in bed and cover your head and neck with pillows. If you're outdoors, well, that's also actually, in most cases, a pretty good place to be. Move to an open space away from buildings and power lines. If you're driving, well, it's a little hard to feel an earthquake, at least at first when you're driving. But if it's strong enough, you'll feel it. And the wise thing to do is pull over somewhere safe, pull the emergency brake. Probably don't pull over right over or under a bridge. Now, if you're near the coast, this is where we can start talking about tsunamis. Um, Earthquakes are the main thing that cause tsunamis. Other things can cause tsunamis too. Tsunami is something that happens when the ocean gets perturbed, gets raised. Maybe the seafloor gets pushed up, and if an earthquake happens under the seafloor, that can cause the sea floor to push up, and that pushes up the whole ocean above it, and that creates a wave. And what goes up must come down, and that's the tsunami. Tsunamis can also be caused by landslides. So let's say there's a coastal landslide, either related to an earthquake or not. That landslide goes from the land and pushes its way into the water. Well, that will perturb the ocean surface a lot too, and that will create a local tsunami. So The biggest earthquakes are generally responsible for tsunamis. You're not going to usually have a tsunami for a smaller earthquake than, maybe 7.5 or so. It's about the smallest earthquake that will likely cause a tsunami. But then again, there are these kind of other factors. And the general advice is if you're near the coast, if you're near any large body of water, you don't know what's happening under the surface there. And the earthquake shaking is also your tsunami warning. So if you're near the coast and you feel an earthquake, we'll ride out the shaking, and then there might be a tsunami on its way. There might or might not be, but you don't want to wait for it to find out. You want to get to high ground and follow your tsunami evacuation plan. There's some older advice that still kind of persists in the popular imagination about what to do to protect yourself. One of the things that people used to think was sensible was getting in a doorway uh, or getting in something called the triangle of life position. Both of these are not really um, uh, very safe. They're not particularly safe. Um, it used to be thought that doorways were more a solid part of construction, but that's really not true in the United States. Years of evidence has shown that doorways are not safer than just getting under a sturdy desk or table, and so we still prefer drop, cover, hold on. And I've given some other examples here on the right side of the screen. You know, some of us, I think some folks in the room work in healthcare settings or work with people in healthcare settings. Um, and this is just a good example to start thinking through whatever organization you're working in. If you're working in an office or really anywhere, make sure you're safe before helping others. It's like getting oxygen on the airplane. Help yourself, get yourself safe, and then protect others. Um, if there are things that can move around, for example, in a hospital, there could be wheelchairs, beds with wheels, anything, lab equipment that's on tables, try to secure that if you can, or just get away from it. Help others, encourage others to protect themselves, get low to the ground, stop moving, drop, cover, hold on. Um, And there's all sorts of considerations. I'm here in my home office and I have an idea of where I want to be and where I don't want to be during shaking. Um, I don't want to be by the window. I don't want to be next to the television that could kind of topple over, especially if it's not secured. Um, but one thing that's especially important about hospitals and other and other kind of critical systems that we rely on for society is they need to be at the core of disaster resilience. They need to be up and ready to go the second the disaster stops to help other people. So that could be schools, that could be governments, that could be hospitals. All of these are crucial to the functioning of society after a big disaster, like an earthquake. Now, here's some more things. Uh, I think I can share these slides after the presentation so you can all kind of refer to this sort of stuff. But these are some basic things that you can think about to prepare for an earthquake in advance. Secure objects that could fall over. Now, um, this is often underthought about, right? We think about, is our building going to survive? And that's really important. But it's really expensive to rebuild a building if it's unsafe for earthquakes. What you can do for really cheap is strap down furniture, equipment, refrigerators, bookshelves, computers, televisions, carts, cabinets. Make sure these things are secured to the wall. All it takes is a little widget that you can buy for a couple of bucks. There's various things. You can bolt them to the wall. You can strap them to the wall. All these things are available at hardware stores or online, and it's a really cheap intervention that you could do in advance. If there are things that are likely to topple, or if they did topple, would present a serious risk to you or your employees, strap those things down. Also, identify vulnerable utility infrastructure, utilities and other lifelines that have, with gas pipes, water. All of these things are going to be crucial to getting up and running right after shaking stops. Make sure these things are secured, and make sure you know if you have access to emergency power or other things like that. Business continuity, have supplies on hand for your employees. Things might not be operating normally, so plan to operate without internet or with difficulty moving around on road networks, etc. Could be 2 weeks is a good time to is a good amount of time to be ready for. Think about your communications plan. How are you going to communicate with your public, with your employees? If you're in a hospital, with your patients, if you're in a school, with your students and community and families. Make sure your employees and leaders are prepared. You can do earthquake drills. In many schools in high earthquake risk zones, uh, earthquake preparedness, earthquake drills are mandated. That's not true in most offices and in most other professional settings. And so, in many ways, our kids are much more prepared than our adults, but that doesn't have to be that way. You can participate in the Great Shakeout Drill, which happens every October. It's an international drill where millions of people participate. You can be one of those. You can also do it on your own time. You can do tabletop and functional exercises to simulate how your organization would respond in the minutes, hours, and days after an earthquake. And then the last thing here is make use of the tools that are available to you. And the U.S. Geological Survey, the USGS, has many tools. And one of those is earthquake early warning. So I'm going to talk about some of those tools, in particular earthquake early warning, for the second half of this presentation. So the U.S. Geological Survey is the federal agency responsible for providing information and resources related to earthquakes and other natural disasters. There's a variety of products available, and this is kind of snapshot of what they are. I'm going to spend a lot of time, like I said, today with ShakeAlert, which is the earthquake early warning system. But there are also lots of tools you can use before earthquakes happen. You can make use of earthquake scenarios where you can get a sense of what type of shaking or damage you would experience in your location. Probabilistic seismic hazard analysis, operational earthquake forecasting, all of these are available. During the earthquake, ShakeAlert earthquake early warning is the first information that's available. There's also other notification services after the fact, a few minutes later. When you get into the post-earthquake realm, whether that's minutes after or hours after, there's a whole variety of other information that's available for your emergency response. So first, shake maps. This is our best guess of who actually felt shaking at what level after the earthquake. Did you feel it? Is a crowdsourced citizen science about earthquakes. Basically, everyone who felt an earthquake can go on the usgs.gov website and enter in how they experienced the earthquake at their location. Then ShakeCast is a little more detailed version of that. There's information about faults and operational aftershock forecasting, which is important to know because every earthquake, especially every significant earthquake, will lead to lots of aftershocks. You want to have your emergency managers ready and prepared for what those might look like. So there's a lot here. Let's get actually one more note. All of the data for all of those products comes from these what are called regional seismic networks. So the U.S. Geological Survey is the federal agency that collects all that information and helps distribute it to the public. But you also, chances are, have local experts. So I'm at the University of Washington at the Pacific Northwest Seismic Network, the PNSN. We are the ones who are actually doing all the earthquake monitoring. All the data that we collect gets fed back into the USGS for national distribution. But we also have local experts here at the University of Washington and the University of Oregon. And I can also help you get in contact with your local seismic network wherever you are around the country. Those are also really great resources, and they can also, provide a more personal touch. If you're here in Washington, we do outreach events. We visit tribes across the state. We try to build these connections and get involved however you would like us to get involved. We can really be boots on the ground here. All right, let's talk about earthquake early warning. The ShakeAlert system is the name of the earthquake early warning system. Like I said, it's available in Washington, Oregon, and California right now, and it is fully operational. So if there is an earthquake in any of those states, chances are you'll start getting notifications on your phone if you happen to be within those borders. There's also a serious thought about serious considerations from the federal government about expanding ShakeAlert into Alaska. That will probably happen in the next couple of years, I would say. Beyond that, perhaps Nevada, Utah, other areas where there's high concentrations of earthquake. This is under consideration, but for now, it's just on the West Coast. And earthquake early warning is not earthquake prediction. It's just rapid detection of earthquakes. So wherever an earthquake starts, there are seismic sensors, permanent seismic sensors installed in the ground nearby. And in a matter of a second or two, those sensors start feeling the earthquake. And then algorithms automatically provide information, provide pretty good estimates about how big the earthquake is going to be and who is it going to affect. All that happens in a couple of seconds. That information gets pushed out to USGS data servers, and then we rely on a series of technical partners to deliver that information to the public. I'll talk about how that works. First, a brief timeline. We went live in California in 2019. By 2021, we rolled out publicly in Oregon and Washington. So we've had years of testing on the ShakeAlert system. It's worked really well so far. There's very few false or missed alerts. We're at kind of a 90+% hit rate, which is pretty impressive given that it's really hard to detect these earthquakes and distribute information. All of this, by the way, I should mention, happens in a couple of seconds. And the warning times people get are typically in the range of, as low as just a few seconds to as high as tens of seconds or even a minute in some cases. It depends on where you are relative to the earthquake. Obviously, if you're closer to where the earthquake started, you'll get less warning time than if you're a little bit farther away. But those waves travel out and will affect everyone in this map. Okay, moving forward. So ShakeAlert is a public-private partnership. I've spoken a lot about the public side, which is the universities and the seismic networks and the federal government. These are the public agencies that detect the earthquakes and provide information in raw data form. And the private part of this arrangement is through several technical partners who are licensed by the U.S. Geological Survey to take that ShakeAlert data and distribute it. And there are various ways to distribute it. I'll talk about some of those details in just a moment. So kind of two main ways that the ShakeAlert data gets out in the world. So the first way, the way that people think of most of all for mass public alerting is with smartphones, with cell phones. The other half is with these kind of more customized automated actions that I'll talk about in a bit. But first, let's focus on the mass alerting via smartphones half of ShakeAlert. So there's a couple of ways that ShakeAlert goes out into phones. The first is an app developed by one of the universities, UC Berkeley, and that app is called MyShake. If you're anywhere in the ShakeAlert alerting region, you can download MyShake and enter your information, and it will alert you no matter what kind of phone you have. MyShake will be available on your phone. So that's one way. The second way is anyone who has an Android phone, so not an iPhone, but an Android phone, the Android operating system, no matter who is the manufacturer of those phones, the Android operating system automatically delivers ShakeAlert early warning to anyone with an Android phone by default. So if you uh, and that's great. Um, if you have an iPhone, the most proactive way to get these alerts is through this MyShake app. So I highly recommend downloading it if you're in one of those West Coast states with ShakeAlert. And then the final way that these alerts get out is through the wireless emergency alert system, the WIA system. And you may be familiar with this from Amber Alerts or Silver Alerts or weather alerts. When your phone, when everyone's phone in the room does that, that's the WIA system working. And now WIA also delivers ShakeAlert earthquake alerts. Their threshold for alert delivery is a bit higher. So they'll only alert you for earthquakes that are more likely to cause serious damage, magnitude 5 and above, whereas these other mechanisms kick in at a somewhat lower level. So if you want more customization over how you get the alerts, I'd recommend using your Android phone if you have one, or the MyShake app. Let's talk about the other half of what you can do with ShakeAlert. And this is where you, as uh, a representative of tribes or an organization that serves tribes, can really start to make use of this data and customize it for your own needs. So at its core, ShakeAlert is a piece of data that lives in the server lives in a server that says some information about earthquake size and magnitude and intensity at various locations. And that data can be used to trigger automated actions. And I'll go through some examples in detail later, but one thing that's really key for a lot of organizations is public announcements. So if you have a public address system or a voice-enabled fire alarm system, any sort of mass communication system, whether you use your computers, your phones, anything like that, overhead speakers, outdoor sirens, any of these mechanisms can be used to deliver ShakeAlert warnings. Any of these can be hooked up to a server or a technical partner or a consultant, and you could make this work so that earthquake data or earthquake warnings are fed through your PA systems. Other automated actions that don't involve kind of human notification are, think about what would you do if you had a few seconds of warning? What would you do to protect your infrastructure? In the case of rail, you definitely want to slow down trains. You could notify your bus drivers through handheld radios to, hey, earthquake coming, slow down your bus, pull over, etc. Stopping elevators and opening the doors. You don't want to be in an elevator during an earthquake. And if we can know a few seconds before shaking reaches you, you can stop an elevator and open the doors, let people get out. Opening firehouse doors. Now, this is crucial because in earthquakes in the past, power has gone out or doors have jammed shut at fire stations, and that renders their emergency vehicles useless or just difficult to access. I mean, in past earthquakes, firefighters have had to break down their own firehouse doors to even get the vehicles out. If you could open those doors in advance before shaking reaches your location, then it's easy to get the vehicles out in time. Throttling or shutting off water and gas valves. This is useful in utility settings or in more local settings. Activating generators, slowing or stopping heavy machinery that's in motion. You don't want heavy things moving during an earthquake. If you can automatically slow those or stop those from moving, you can save yourself a lot of money or protect your employees who are near those machineries, for example. Now, let's talk about how you can actually implement a ShakeAlert solution in your own community, how to get started. So to summarize the data pathway, we detect earthquakes with these seismic sensors. We send that information to USGS computers, which are analyzing the size and scope of the earthquake, and then we distribute that, and that's where you can come in. You can be a part of this alert distribution pathway. Some examples of how this has been used already. First, in a hospital setting. So this is Cedars-Sinai Hospital in the Los Angeles area. It's a major hospital complex. There's thousands of people there at any given time. And hospitals, like I said, need to be up and running during and after an earthquake. So the building is built strong, but there's lots of people in an earthquake in the hospital, excuse me, that need to be protected during an earthquake. So um, Cedars-Sinai has automatically sent their alerts from ShakeAlert through their PA system and through their two-way radios, giving their staff time to prepare themselves and to protect their patients whenever there's an earthquake. And this system is activated before, during real earthquakes, and it's been really effective there. Um, Another example, schools. So, one that's close to home for me is the Stanwood Camano School District in Western Washington. They were actually one of the first school districts in the country to connect to ShakeAlert, and it's quite a simple implementation. They have a little hardware box that sits on their wall, and it's wired into their PA system. Whenever there is an earthquake, this box gives a message in advance and warns all the students and staff across 13 buildings across the whole school district to protect them. One nice thing about having this integrated into their PA system is that they could use this for their earthquake drills. So not only do you have the earthquake early warning during a real earthquake, but you can prepare people during your earthquake drills with exactly what it's going to sound like before earthquake shaking starts. And there's going to be a voice on their PA system, and they know it says, earthquake, protect yourself now, drop cover, hold on. More and more schools are adopting this across the West Coast. This is um, we think, personally, I think this is one of the biggest areas. I would really like to see earthquake early warning in every school in earthquake land. Every school where earthquakes pose a threat to students and teachers. This is just such a clear, a place where students don't have their cell phones. In most cases, teachers are not looking at their phones all day. It's a vulnerable population. You have a group of people all together. It could be really dangerous if people aren't protecting themselves. And we have this very simple way to get alerts out to people. To me, this is like, if you have a fire alarm in a school, you should have an earthquake alarm as well. So we're seeing this more and more, and I'm really pleased about that. Another setting that's not as sexy as a hospital or school, but is super important for society's response after an earthquake is water utilities. Now, water utilities often have pipes connected to reservoirs, to large sources of water, and those pipes can break and can lose lots of water during an earthquake, especially if they're older. And a lot of us are in water utility districts with a lot of old infrastructure. Luckily, you can, a lot of utilities are connected to SCADA systems, which are these kind of automated control systems that can connect to water valves and proactively throttle water valves that might break during an earthquake to prevent massive loss of water. So again, this is another big thing that's going on in the Pacific Northwest and California, but this is just one example. The city of Grants Pass is using ShakeAlert to automatically close their water valves. Other utilities are automatically shutting off pumps, which are not they're not needed to run at all times. But if they are running during shaking, it could be it's just be millions of dollars of loss when those things break. And that's more likely to happen if they're in motion during an earthquake than not. So this is an area, like I said, it's not super visible to the public, but if you have water to respond after an earthquake, your community is in much better shape than if you don't. And it's fresh water for drinking or fire prevention. All of this is super critical, and people are not always aware of it. But the cities that are starting to protect themselves this way are realizing huge benefits. The cost benefit analysis turns out to be really favorable for earthquake early warning and water utilities. Now, how do you actually connect to ShakeAlert? There's two pathways here. I'm not going to get into so much detail now because I'm almost running out of time, but I will say these two pathways are one, you can work with one of our licensed technical partners. So the USGS licenses many technical partners to take this data and distribute it. Basically, they can serve as consultants um, or uh, product. They offer products that you can buy off the shelf or consulting arrangements that organizations can work with. And these are kind of um, experts. They're licensed to do this. They're experienced. They're vetted by the U.S. Geological Survey, and it can be good to do this. It costs some money, but it's quick to spin up a project this way if you want to get access to ShakeAlert data quickly. The other option is to have your own implementation, become your own technical partner, and this is free to do because this is a taxpayer-funded early warning system. Your organization connect to the USGS servers yourself, make use of that data, and do whatever you like with it as long as you get licensed and approved by the USGS. That could be an option for organizations with ideas for customizations that haven't been done before, or if you just have a really solid IT team or facilities team, you can do this yourself. It's actually not that challenging. I'll skip ahead a couple of things here, get to the last slide so we can open up to questions. But, part of my role here and the role of the other people on this screen is to get you connected to ShakeAlert. Okay, we can help you with all the steps along the way. If this is something you're interested in, please reach out to us. This is our jobs. We love nothing better than to work with organizations. No organization is too big or too small to make use of earthquake early warning. So please reach out. With that, I will stop my presentation, and if we have any additional time, maybe we could do some question and answer. Yeah, what do you think, Eliza?
I think this is a great idea. I'm trying to get my camera to turn on. I think your presentation was amazing. I'm giving you claps around for everyone. Um, do we have any questions in the chat? If not, I have a few questions. Um, ah,
Sure, and this could be about anything, earthquakes in general. If there's basic questions or anything details, feel free.
I see a hand raised from Cody. If you want,
Might have been an applause. I'm not sure
oh,
if
so
it was
was that an applause? Okay, never mind. Um, okay, I don't see anyone have any questions, but I did have a couple just to, reiterate some information for everybody. Um, how can you detect the earthquakes before they happen?
Yeah, great question. So we're not actually detecting them before they happen. It's rapid detection once they start. So earthquakes start out at a point, right? It's like a wave in the ocean, right? So if you throw a rock in the ocean, and the waves will spread out. And as you get farther away, you will feel them less strongly, but you will see them or you will feel them. Same with an earthquake; they start at a point, and we rely on the fact that we have sensors all over the place. So wherever an earthquake starts, we are sensing it really quickly, and we can actually beat the speed of the earthquake spreading by sending data quicker than the earthquake itself spreads, right? So if you're a little farther away from the earthquake, we can send you an alert on your phone before that earthquake shaking, that wave spreads out and reaches you.
We do have a question here. Are the Android Shake notifications going to be as responsive and fast as the dedicated apps with which collaborated with ShakeAlert? And that is from Phil.
Yes. I'll start with that one. And I know there's another one, but yes, Android is exactly as quick as that MyShake or other apps. The one that would be slower is actually the WIA system. The wireless emergency alert system, like I said, that's kind of like an Amber Alert. That goes out to all phones, but it is not built for speed in the same way as these apps and the Android system are. So that's why we recommend kind of not only relying on WIA, but also getting an app or using your operating system.
Okay. And then how expensive does the essential equipment to automate machine to machine action tend to be for instance, the hardware box in the school near yourself? Also from
That's a
Lotto.
great question. So um, it can range a lot because some of these some of these hardware solutions do a very simple operation. So it could be as simple as connecting with an auxiliary cord to a sound system or a speaker or a PA system. For those really simple implementations, there's typically a monthly service fee of about $50 or $60 a month, um, which for a school level, that could be, $700 a year, which can be pretty affordable. There's also some resources that pay for them. Some of these other more elaborate implementations could be more on the order of thousands of dollars per year to implement if they're also interacting with utility systems or hospitals, or basically the more complex the implementation, the more expensive it'll be. But in some on the order of hundreds to thousands of dollars per year. And most of that is to maintain kind of server uptime because these systems have to be super reliable. They always have to be, doubly connected to the internet. They're super resilient systems.
Um, Follow-up question would be expense. Are there grants or payment programs that are connected with the ShakeAlert system that not just tribes, obviously, but for individuals who are often in these areas of earthquakes that could possibly apply for or should know about?
This is an area where there are some answers, but they're not going to be super satisfying. So, um, so far, state governments haven't mandated the use of anything with regard to ShakeAlert, and so they haven't funded anything either. FEMA, uh, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, of course, has some grants that will cover earthquake early warning implementations. So the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP, will cover earthquake early warning. Also, BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, will fund earthquake early warning. So both earthquake early warning is eligible for both of those. And some organizations have taken advantage of that. But if you've ever worked with FEMA grants before, you know they can be very expensive even just to apply for. And so many organizations choose to just spend the money on the implementation, which is pretty cheap relative to, in some cases, doing an extensive benefit cost analysis, which is required for FEMA.
Let's see. I think I have one more question here. How does one get access to ShakeAlert and how do they install into your home? Just so everyone has that information again.
So as an individual level, there are a couple of, let's see, there's one of the ShakeAlert technical partners will sell a product for like an individual home. Um, Most people will use kind of apps for personal alerting. For organization, the pathway is to either contact one of the technical partners, and I can um, maybe in the follow-up, I can provide a list of all those technical partners. We have some information there on our websites about who those all are. You could contact one of those, or like I said, you could reach out to me or someone in on the last slide that I shared with all the contact information and get connected yourself to the data. If you want to get connected yourself to the data without going through one of these technical partner vendors, that requires uh, writing a little application to the U.S. Geological Survey, and they'll look at your application. You'll write a statement of work. This is what we're planning to do with it, and you'll get access to that data feed, and you can do what you want with it.
Well, everyone, we are coming to the end of our session. We're ending a little bit early today, but please make sure you put your email address in the chat box so I can send out this information back out to you guys and to let you know when the next seminar series is going to be happening. Um, Thank you, Gabriel, for speaking to everybody today, and I really appreciate you for speaking and sharing all this information.
It's my pleasure. Thanks, everyone. Again, feel free to reach out if you want any more information, or I can help connect you to the right people if I don't have it.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Please put your emails in there so I can send that information out to you.